Howdy, folks. Welcome. Thanks for joining us. It's good to see everybody. I see all of y'all in the Twitch chat. I see all of y'all in the YouTube chat. Throw up a hello. Throw up, your emojis. Bald boomer talking about emojis. That's clearly a good way to start the stream. But this stream is not about me. We got a fantastic special guest. We've got our friend Harvey Moon here. Harvey, how are you, my friend?
Doing well. Great to see you.
Thanks for joining us. It's going to be a lot of fun. We got a lot of cool topics to talk about. I think maybe a good place to even just start is, do you want to tell people a little bit about yourself? Because I know you've had like a pretty amazing, diverse range of career, projection mapping, robots, like all over the place. Do you want to tell people a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. I guess it all goes back to art school. I was in school, SAIC in Chicago, and started in photography and then moved into the robotics program, and they had an art and technology whole division, and they had a robotics class and they had processing and Arduino, and that sort of really whet my appetite for what was out there and what was possible. And that was really in the early days when processing was just getting started, and people were very confused when you would say that you made art with computers, and it was very novel and silly. And
to be honest, most people still don't understand what we do. So a lot of things have come a long way, but that one is still a tricky one I'm working on.
It's true. It's true. But it's been a very exciting and unexpected change, as the stuff we know has become more and more popular and prevalent, and all the technology that used to exist, the $35 Arduino is now a $3 Wi-Fi chip from China. So what's changed in the past 15 years is just enormous and like incredible and exciting for everything that we do. So starting there with processing and Maximus P and Arduino and making robotics and playing with stepper motors, and pursuing my practice as an artist, building different like you mentioned, robotic drawing machines was one of the first things I got into. And after graduating from college, I sort of fell into this interactive industry. I don't even know what interactive and immersive.
We can. Hey, listen, it's not a bias, but we can call it the interactive and immersive industry.
I guess so. So yeah, just out of college, I met a guy from Leviathan at an art show that I had, and he looked at my drawing machine, he looked over me, and said, we got to work with you. We got to get you on the team. And so just sort of fell into the position, and as the first 6 months was just doing TouchDesigner lessons. Back when it was what was that? It was like
would have been right when 88 came out, right?
I feel like I was still running 077, and 088 was like a big thing. It was a big jump, and Python was just getting embedded, and it was clunky. And I was like, what the hell is this? Like, I don't know if I want to get into this. Like, I don't like this. And it only took about 6 or 8 months before I was like, oh my gosh, like this is something really powerful. And at that time, friend Matt Daly was my boss, and he had sort of pushed me along, like, all right, just keep going with it. And he would give me tutorials on it. And that really catalyzed my whole TouchDesigner career, because once TouchDesigner, you're in demand. And there's so much out there about finding people that know how to do this stuff really well. And, Elburz and I were talking about it, and there might be a couple hundred, a couple handfuls of people that really know this stuff really well. And if you're one of them, you're in a community that respects and appreciates what it takes to learn all this stuff. So,
and that's a couple hundred in the whole world we're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's growing quickly, but it is sort of a still a very niche, technical understanding to get all this stuff together. So, from there, after Leviathan, I had my eyes set on bigger and better, and what was out there, what was next in this vein. I was just so excited. So I moved to San Francisco, and I started working at Obscura Digital, which was, my dream job. So I just chased it down until I got it. And started at a really interesting time and was a part of the event team. So had a really great experience jumping around doing projection mapping gigs all over the world. And it was just like, I couldn't have understood at the time how lucky I was having those experiences, and really pushing myself to go big and do these huge projects in my 20s without really knowing, having much experience projecting on giant buildings, but saying, okay, TouchDesigner, you can figure it out. Getting thrown under the bus a little bit, but having enough, young energy to figure it out. And having a good team. Like the crew at Obscura was like really, really solid. And so really that was sort of a really nice pinnacle of doing a lot of amazing projection gigs, Empire State Building a couple times. And I'll never forget the Vatican, projecting on the Vatican. So we had some fun times with that. And then Obscura went through some changes and had an acquisition with Madison Square Garden. And so at that point, I decided that I wanted to take it in a different direction and take some of the learnings from all of these other companies and kind of start my own thing. And formed a little splinter group with some people I worked well with in the past, and started a new company called MB Labs. And so what we're really thinking about was like, how do we take all of the stuff that we like to do and create an environment where we can do this stuff and enjoy each other's company and have fun making the projects, and really focus on good, strong foundations. So a lot of these companies that we would work with over the past, they would put design and tech and the final output first, which is important, but they forget what it takes to get there. And they might have a rotating crew that has to be retrained every time a new thing happens. And so really I'm trying to reflect on that and think about, all right, how do you add longevity and strength to what we build and what we do, and how do we make sure that we're not rebuilding it every time, and what can we do to sort of build that dynamism into our core so that we can grow off of it and build off of those platforms, instead of just whatever new is coming out the door every time.
I think that's a really interesting thing, like that I've seen from your work and from MB Labs, is this thoughtfulness around process, a work environment. Because to your point, like, it's so easy to get hired by somebody, all they do is focus on the final output, and literally everything else just gets thrown under the steamroller or into like the furnace as a like people like they're just like, oh yeah, you developers, you guys are disposable because you guys are contractors and we never have to talk to you again if this goes bad. And I think that's something that's been really cool just to hear about you guys and your work, is like this idea of like, well, technology is the foundation, and you got to have a strong foundation. And like what you were saying, this idea of working with people that you like working with, and how do we add longevity to that? Like those are things that I think are, and it'll sound weird because especially in an industry where cutting edge is like the word we all hate the most, but those sound like cutting edge thought processes and like philosophies in our industry, where before it was all about like move fast, no longevity, like winner take all bodies in the dumpster, whatever we got to do to get there. So I want to come back and talk about that, but I had a couple questions just about your kind of process early on, because you mentioned you went to photography school and then you transitioned into a robotics program, and there was lots of processing in Maximus P. Was that program, for folks as reference, more of like a computer science program or more of a kind of creative technology program?
Yeah, I mean, this is a really cool art school. So it's an interdisciplinary school. It's called the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, and I have nothing bad to say about it. It was a great time. If anyone's looking for, I know they have a great grad program too. But they were interdisciplinary, so you could take a class in any department, and you could say, well, tomorrow, next time I want to try drawing. And when you're 18, it's better to have a chance to experiment and try different things, because you never know when you're 18 what you're going to do when you're 30. So, I came in with a background in photography, with an understanding of technology and an interest in learning technique, so growing up at a darkroom in the basement, and it was very much a part of my, the process was exciting to me. And so, it was really, it was not a computer science program at all. It was for artists, by artists, artists that were interested in technology. Chicago has a really cool and dense background and history of technology, art, new media, and there's a lot of really interesting old school players in the Chicago scene doing, analog computing and stuff like that, and building, all sorts of stuff. So they had a really cool and small community of, tech-minded artists doing interesting things. I don't know if it really expanded into the sort of realm that we are in now, but I know they had a cave system, like way ahead of their time, and they had, we had a machine shop, so we would do, machining and lathe and CNC tooling, and as an art student, without really ever having an engineering background, getting a little bit of access into this stuff and enough that I could start learning more and training and teaching myself was really enough that I needed to get started and just open the doors to all the other things.
I find that so interesting because especially like looking at a lot of your work, this idea of stuff being real, I think appears a lot. And I'm wondering, like, did a lot of that stem from just that accessibility of having a place to go experiment with kind of this mini fabrication stuff or robotics or these kind of things? Or was that something that was always kind of interesting to you?
Yeah, I mean, I guess you're talking about like the physicality of it, like how.
Yeah, because a lot of your projects seem to have this physicality or a connection to real space as opposed to just here's purely digital like artwork.
Oh yeah. I like to stay away from the digital. I think, for me, the real value is having those shared experiences, having those in real life, tangible interactions, and for me, it's very much about that process, and it has to be something that I can hold in my hands and feel and see and touch in the end. So, I usually stay away from the digital, and VR is not something I gravitate toward a lot.
You're not sold on VR yet?
I'm more about the shared experience. So if it's a singular, or it's on a screen, AR on this, then you're only applying for one person. And so I'm trying to find other ways that you could bring people together and have a communal experience with things, and projection mapping is absolutely one of those routes, and in the art space too, kinetic projects and stuff like that.
And I think that's interesting because I think projection mapping we're going to talk a bunch about today, and in a lot of different facets, from like the educational side of it, performance side, and then kind of like project side. Is that something that did you look at your first projection mapping and be like, I love that is sick? Or was it something that you discovered through practice and through experimentation?
The first projection mapping I saw was Amon Tobin's live set.
I feel like that should be a drinking game on this show, where like every time any of us say Amon Tobin's ISEB was like the first, everyone's like, everybody in the chat's got to take a shot for that one.
Yeah. Well, I mean, one of the things that was why I worked at Obscura, or I'm sorry, Leviathan, was that they had just finished that shoot like a year before, and I was like, okay, what are they doing? What is going on over there? I need to learn this stuff. So, I mean, for all of us, it's seared in our memory that, you can't forget it. It's a real impressive contraption.
Now, one interesting thing that I've seen from your projection mapping like work and experiences is that you didn't really stop with just making projection mapping content. It wasn't just for you, let me make some cool visuals and throw them up on the side of a building. I think for a lot of folks, that's kind of their, I hesitate to say they've made it on the projection mapping like scale of works. But I know you've gone really deep into like calibration systems, kinetic movement while projection mapping is happening, and we're going to talk about one of those projects in a little bit. But what was kind of the impetus for you to kind of keep pushing that side of things?
Yeah, I mean, I think to tie back into what you were saying earlier, I think we're all doing this because we like the process. We love investigating, exploring, learning new stuff. We know that this is sort of it's a long process to gain the skills, to gain all this stuff. And so, I think there was moments when I was spending all night pushing pixels in the stoner on a rooftop, freezing my ass off, that I was thinking there must be an easier way. And I should be smart enough to figure out, to code my way out of this, to find a solution so that I don't need to be sitting here, with a telescope zoomed into a building and getting the pixels to fit between projectors. There must be a better way. And, we like at Obscura, there was some techniques that we had to do automatic calibration, but it wasn't really something that we were employing on every job. They would just send us out and say, figure it out. And
yeah, good luck. We have this. Good luck.
Good luck. We've done it before, see if you can do it this time. And so, at a certain point doing that stuff, you say, well, how do we optimize for this? And how do we not spend all night and we can hang out with the rest of the crew while they go out drinking? And, at the end, a lot of times it would be a skeleton crew that would just need to calibrate all night. And so auto calibration became an obsession. And it was like, okay, if we can get this figured out and I could hit one button and do it better than I could ever do manually, this should be what I focus my energy on. And so it took a number of years, not without any sort of computer science background, to understand the bits and pieces that make up what's used today in auto calibration systems, and then start to piece together something of our own that could accomplish those goals. And then in the process, just like everything, you learn little bits of skill sets that you can then apply down the line. So once you gain a little bit of understanding about a new process, that becomes a palette that you can apply into this and this and this. And then you get all these new ideas and say, okay, now that I know how to do this technique, now this thing can come out, or this, I can do this and this and this. And so once I started going down the calibration route, it opened up a whole new slew of doors and new opportunities and new ideas that I couldn't have even concepted before without understanding those techniques. So, when you start out with projection mapping, I think you've done some demos about this too, like the easy, intermediate, and hard levels of projection mapping. The easy is just get a 2D square onto the wall, the rectangle, get the corners to fit. And then once you learn the 3D level, then you start to think about everything a little differently. And you say, okay, well, what is it? What if I put something else here? How do I get that to work? And how do I create this equivalency between the 3D, the virtual, and the real world? And then you can start to think about all of these other elements that can add on to that and create more texture and more layer to it.
And I think that's the interesting thing, especially even as you're mentioning now, how the projection mapping workflow changes in the mind as you start in this 2D and you're like, oh, I'm drawing shapes and stuff like that. Then you're like, oh, there's this whole 3D side of things. And then all of a sudden the 3D side of things becomes like, oh, hold on a second, we're literally simulating reality virtually and trying to match lens characteristics. And you're like, oh my, this is this is a completely different space compared to the 2D side of things. Now I will say before I kind of ask you a couple more questions, folks in the chat, if you're watching, by all means, if you got questions about anything we're talking about, or if you have any other side questions for Harvey as we're going through this, put them in the chat. I am reading chat. I see you all there. We're having a lovely little time there. The ISAM is the free space on the interactive artist bingo game. I like that. That's Justin, that's a great idea. And I like all the love for everyone in the chat who, it feels like this is one of those secret parties where everyone's like, we don't really like VR, but we had to pretend like we liked VR professionally. And I feel like now, this is a safe space, folks. If you don't like VR, the only one I've ever done was do you remember the first Oculus demo? It was like the Italian countryside or something. And there was a house on a hill. It was I think it was one of the first Oculus dev kit demos. And it was so janky and awful. And I was like, oh, I get it. It's cool, but not for me. But I digress. So one of the things I thought would be interesting to talk about is your journey through calibration systems. Because one of the things I would like to talk about is, the workshop that you did at the summit. I guess it was almost 3 years ago now. 3 years ago? 2 years ago? Jeez.
Yeah.
And it was all about kind of using Vive trackers and controllers as calibration devices. And, even as we're talking about this journey from 2D projection mapping to 3D projection mapping, how was that journey on the calibration side? Was there like, here's your first calibration system, and then that became like a more tricky, and then it became auto, and then it became, while moving? Like, how did that process go for you in that journey?
Yeah. All right. So I'll get specific because I think we all are
Yeah, we got people in the chat are like, yes, please get specific.
Yeah. All right. All right. Let's dive in. So the research really started with CamSnapper. CamSnapper was a copy from a project that a friend made. Kyle McDonald produced a project called MapMapper with I think YCam.
The Y Interlab, right?
Yeah. So a long, long time ago, he figured out this technique that's now used in, I think, MadMapper 2 and a couple other programs. But this technique is sort of a hack on calibrating a camera. So you can think about a projector as a camera in reverse. And so
I always say the good example is for folks coming from audio. And I literally wrote this in a blog post yesterday. If you ever heard the story about the DJ who plugs in his headphones and then starts just yelling into the ear, because essentially it's like the same thing in reverse.
Yeah, we're just talking lensing. So if you want to calibrate a camera lens, there's a certain checkerboard that you can hold up and with some math figure out where the 2D points are, where the 3D points are, and locate the camera and calibrate its lens distortions and intrinsics. This was then repurposed in MapMapper and CamSnapper to go the opposite way. So you would give it a 3D model, and then you would drag and drop, if you guys have ever tried it, crosshairs, and that gives you two sets of points, 3D points on the model, and then 2D points that you've specified on your screen space. So the technique, if you dive into CamSnapper or MapMapper, what it's really doing is an open CV function called calibrate camera, cv2.calibrate camera. And if you look at that, it just takes a set of input points, the ones I just mentioned, the 3D points and the 2D points. And so this algorithm is sort of the magic sauce that makes CamSnapper work, that makes MapMapper work, and a lot of these other things that are starting to auto calibrate systems that include a bit of manual labor. And so once you understand a bit about that, you can apply this to everything. You can take this simple algorithm and apply it to anything with a lens, and suddenly that can be calibrated to other objects, to other worlds.
Yeah, that's interesting. So you're basically extracting this idea of lens from projector or camera, which is like this whole unit, and you're saying, okay, well, we can do like basically anything with a lens can be calibrated.
Exactly. Yeah. And so with the Vive stuff, it was basically like we would calibrate the projector, but use the 3D points from the Vive. So instead of saying,
when you explain it like that, it makes perfect sense. It's rudimentary.
So I started by hacking away at CamSnapper, because CamSnapper doesn't let you input a moving object. You give it a SOP that's frozen in space, and each of those vertices in that SOP could be relative to the origin of the world. And then CamSnapper will move the projector relative to that origin point, gives you the transformation vector and rotation vector from that object. But if your object is on a tracker and moving, then these vertices, say, of your cube are also moving in Vive space, Vive coordinate space. So every vertice on that shape is now in millimeters in the world, in Vive world. And so when I do CamSnapper now, the projector is going to know in Vive space where this exists. And so when I move this around, that real world correlation will stick, will persist.
Interesting.
So it was sort of this layer of understanding. Like once you understand, okay, what is CamSnapper actually doing? What is the open CV calibrate camera function actually need to operate? And then once you understand, okay, that's a really interesting technique, how do you employ that in other interesting, unique ways? And that opened up all these other doors, including the Vive front, and a bunch of other techniques that can, you can use that same method for. So yeah, the Vive one was very exciting, and then you hit on a little bit of success, and then there's your weekend, and you spend that weekend diving in and fixing and changing and discovering new things. And to my surprise, everybody was really excited about this discovery. And so that workshop was really the first time I'd ever done a workshop on this. And it's difficult with Steam VR to have everyone in the workshop experience it, because you can only have one, like tracking system, connected to one computer, connected to Steam at a time. So it was a learning experience, and I do hope to do that workshop again, to talk about it again. And I have modified and built that tool to calibrate the projector to Vive space, sort of like I call it a Vive mapper tool. So that's been growing and building a lot, and I'm hoping to release that out into the world so other people can do this too just as easily.
I think that would be amazing. Yeah, and for folks that haven't seen it, can you talk through at a high level like what the process is like calibrating with Vive? Because I was there, I was on the other side of the lobby. But for folks who have no idea and they're hearing for the first time, like, what Vive calibrating projection mapping, like, what does that even mean? Like, can you talk through some of those steps of like what it looks like to calibrate something with a Vive?
Yeah, so the easiest way that I've done without any, like, just like keeping it really, really simple, and the way that I did the workshop was that I had a little paper target, and I would project a dot, like a crosshair, out into that target. And then you have a tracker, a Vive tracker on that target. Excuse me. And then you move around the space and you match that crosshair with that target. And then you hit a button and it locks those two coordinates. So it's going to make a table with the X, Y, and Z coordinate given by the tracker in world space in millimeters. And then it's going to give you the X and Y pixel that you sent the crosshair to. And then we do this at different depths and different areas, just like you would in
yeah, so it's kind of like using CamSnapper, except you're using the Vive, controller or tracker instead of having to do like the hilarious, like the classic 180 around the head while you're mousing on this side maneuver.
Yeah, exactly.
Classic.
So yeah, it's the same output as CamSnapper, where we're going to give it two tables, one 3D coordinates and one 2D coordinates. And there's really only one way that the camera can see using those sets of points. And so by figuring out all these points in Vive space and then figuring out all these points in projector space, you can calibrate to that world. And then you can instantly do it all in real time, because now you have a fixed projector, you know where that is. The Vive data is coming in really quickly, up to 240 hertz if you can handle it. And then you can attach a geometry directly onto that tracker, and the projector will just see it in your world space. So from there, there's no processing that needs to happen.
That's pretty incredible. Like, especially how you break it down is so interesting that it just becomes kind of these incremental steps of, oh, okay, then you add this, and then, oh, okay, now we just add a little bit of this to that, and then, oh, then there's a Vive tracker on it, and then you get this really kind of amazing system.
Isn't this how we all work? Always, like it is always a sort of incremental knowledge, bits and pieces. How many layers of understanding do we need to have to get all these pieces to function together? And
it definitely
all a gradual additive process.
It is, but I also find it's the thing that we all forget the fastest, because we always see something that looks crazy complicated, and we're like, you know what? I can't do that. That looks crazy. But then we do something else that's insanely complicated just by taking that step for step process. So it's always interesting to me that even the most technically challenging thing, when the person who understands it breaks it down, you're like, oh, that makes total sense. Like, I get it.
Cool. I'm glad I explained it.
And I think people are really going to look forward to that workshop when you do it again and releasing the tool. I think people are going to be like, people are jonesing for that one hard, I think. So it's an exciting one.
It is an exciting technique for sure.
Now we have a couple questions from chat I want to get to, because we got some interesting ones. Drumbeat's asking, Have you spent much time in shared VR spaces like Wave or VR Chat? I think shared experience is becoming more accessible.
Yeah, I did a little bit of VR chat.
How was it? I haven't done it. Landon has told me all of these like crazy VR chat stories, and also Hal has told me about crazy VR chat. I've never been it, and I feel like I can't go into VR chat without one of these crazy like people to guide me to where the craziest VR chat stuff is.
Well, I was guided by a friend that spent a lot of time in there, and she was telling me how crazy it was, and was making art projects about it at the time. And I don't know, just not not my thing. My face gets sweaty. There's a lot of furries around. It's not my vibe.
Did you get the thing where like 100 Knuckles characters ran at you?
I don't know, but there was a lot of weird animals and weird shapes and weird people talking at me, and I just didn't feel into it. I didn't get into it. But I do think that there is a future in which we will all wear headsets for half the day, and
I mean, we're pretty close. If anyone saw the 2 monitors like inches away from my face, completely covering my field of view, we're not far away. I don't think we're far away.
Yeah, we're pretty close already. So I think it will get there, and I think these things are still in their infancy. But I don't spend a lot of time in them. They never really hooked on for me. I also just work too much to
all day, all night,
play around in VR too much. But friends have brought me in and tried to show me around before.
So we got another interesting question. How does Harvey's work intersect with the janky auto calibration stuff in MadMapper? And I guess another way of thinking about the question is, how is it similar? How is it different? And it sounds like it's more similar than different.
I don't know MadMapper at all.
I've only seen because last I saw they had the Kantan mapper style like 2D drawing.
Yes.
And I think they had some, what was it called, light field calibration when they do the black and white
like
stripes.
Structured light.
Gray code, structured light. That's the one. I think they had that one. I didn't know if they had the 3D version of things. I don't know if it supports 3D.
Someone says here, MadMapper does 2D OpenCV
stuff. Oh, interesting.
So maybe they're, I'm assuming that since Mapamuck is on GitHub, that people are bringing
everyone has tried to integrate it.
It's got another tool for 3D models.
Oh, interesting. Might be something we're going to check out later.
Output for Lightform. Oh, output to Fermata. Yeah, I mean, all these things interoperate. I think, my technique is more like we've done a lot of research on what's out there, what's cutting edge, like Disney Research does a lot
Disney
of
Research does crazy stuff.
And especially in projection calibration, they release pretty often, a whole tons of papers on cutting edge techniques. So I guess the difference when you're developing your own tools is that you know them really well and you can add things to them and get them to fit your needs. When you're using some product that says it does it all, usually you run into some issues where it does maybe 90 or 80% of what you want, but it's not completely there and you don't know how to change it or you can't get in there. Of course, I don't know MadMapper, so I don't know. Someone said janky, so maybe that's informing the way I'm talking about it.
We also got it sort of kind of works. So
yeah. So I mean, like the cool thing about Touch is like if CamSnapper is being weird, you can dive in and learn some more things. Like I think just recently they enabled the reprojection value, which is a number that the OpenCV function would give you to tell you how good your fitting is.
Oh yeah.
So, back in the day, I sort of had to learn and like get that value out of CamSnapper, and now they've included it, as something you can access. But there's always a little bit more you can dive in and touch, and you can learn what the hell's going on, how's this working, how can I reformulate it into my own systems or use Vive instead of some fixed 3D object, and build upon these technologies and learn from them. So I don't really know MadMapper or what their techniques are or exactly how they're going about it.
We got another question from Brendan here, who was asking about calibration software, but the main part of the question, I think, is, did you ever experiment with structured light in your journey? Or did you kind of go straight into the 3D side of things and working with CamSnap or MacMock and those kind of calibrations?
Yeah, so structured light is a really cool and interesting technique for discovering projector pixels in camera space. And that's about it.
Oh, interesting.
So
I've never heard it described like that. That's interesting.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. So from there, you can do a number of other techniques, including these 3D reconstruction techniques. If you have a 3D model, you could do something like ray tracing back from the camera's position to find the UV coordinates for each projector pixel. So you can do a lot of interesting stuff with a gray code structured light scan, because it gives you so much more information about what's being projected and where it lands on the surface. And so, you know, for example, if you calibrate your camera to the object, to the world, right, and then you project on that surface, you know what that surface should look like, and so you can tell the projector exactly what content to put on each of its regions.
Oh,
so
interesting.
You can use this mixture of 3D and structured light to get a really amazing result. And so this is a nice little segue into a product that we've developed called Optimap. So we've been working on a structured light camera-based auto calibration system for about 5 years, and we're just now coming out of beta. So we're announcing this out to the world. It's basically a built-in TouchDesigner. Yeah. This is maybe the first public time we're talking about here.
Is it really? You heard it here first, folks. You heard it here first. If you don't forget to hit the like button, the subscribe, because if you want to hear things first, this is where you hear it.
This is the place. This is where it is. So the system is using a calibrated camera. A lot of times we'll use a fisheye, you know, something like a point gray, like grasshopper camera. PoE, networked, all that jazz. And then you can locate the camera to the world, to whatever object or scene you're looking at. And then it gives you a remap file. So you can run that, drop it in TouchDesigner, and put your content directly into that remap, and you can get your content back out on that output. And we also produce blend masks, so you can apply blend masks to multiple channels. Yeah. It's really about warping and blending multiple channels together using a camera-based system.
Is there somewhere folks can go to learn more about it? Do we have a link or anything like right now?
Yeah, we are still in the process of launching the site. I can send you.
And if not, then folks, stay tuned to like our new. You don't also sign up for the newsletter, because once Harvey releases, don't worry, we'll be telling you about it. Like we ain't hiding it. If you know. Yeah,
we're very early here, so we're working on getting some more documentation in the real world. So
that sounds amazing.
This is still super early, but it's meant to play really nicely with TouchDesigner, because we're doing all these TouchDesigner playback systems, and so we wanted to build a product that could just slot in really easily and be something that even a client could use and hit the button and auto calibrate on their end. And so,
which is like the dream. That's like the dream.
Yeah, we're pretty proud of this. We're pretty excited about it. And you know, the only other competing solutions right now are either scalable displays or Vioso, which both have plugins.
And they're pluses and minuses, from what I've heard.
Yeah, so they have certain issues, and again, because of the scale of their product and their need to address everyone's sort of big uses. They can't be as specific or as technically, you know, complex as something that we're attempting here. So I think there's a lot of things that we can tick off the box that they haven't attempted yet on their systems. But if you're interested in hearing more, we're happy to talk more about that with you guys.
Absolutely. So what I think would be cool is we got a couple more questions. Then folks keep throwing the questions in the chat, but we're going to talk about a project. We're going to talk about Optimap a little bit, and then I'll come back to the question. So, you know, keep throwing the questions in the chat. We're having a good time here. We're having a good time. So I think the next question, Jana's asking, and this is kind of going back to your background a little bit. How was your learning process like for TouchDesigner, and how did you start combining 2D and 3D? And I think just to add to this question a little bit, because I feel like the narrative I hear a lot of time is people open up TouchDesigner for the first time and they're like, it's like angels start coming down out of the sky, you know, the one of them's playing harpsichord, you know, the light rays, you know, that's like when most people talk about their first time getting into TouchDesigner. But it sounded like you actually it took a couple months for it to warm up to you. Is that because of what you came from with processing in Max MSP, or was it just like you're not a? Yeah, tell me a bit about that.
So I was a Max MSP fanatic.
I love Max MSP.
Really,
6.1.10. I will die with 6.1.10 in my blood. You know what I'm talking about? He knows what I'm talking about. The laugh tells me he knows what I'm talking about.
Yeah, those are the days, man. Max MSP, man, it's close to my heart. So, you know, it helps you sort of learn a little bit more about visual programming and how to connect the boxes. But yeah, I was a little against it just because of my comfort zone and you know, coding in Python or in processing. So I used to do sketching in Max, and then I would write it out in processing, and just that linearity was really clear and clean. And it takes a bit in Touch to kind of find your path, right? It's free form. It's an open notebook, and that's intimidating. And that's, you know, where do you start? How do you get into it? And until you kind of find your groove and know how to jump in, and here's how I do projects, and here's how I'd like to organize things, then it can be a little, you know, intimidating on like what do we do with this infinite platform with, you know, zooming and panning and all of this stuff. So I think what really helped was working with people like Matthew Reagan and Mike Walczyk and starting to like sort of formulate, how do we use this thing together, and how do we use this, and how do we, you know, collectively deploy these projects, and what are the right and wrong ways of going about it, and sort of learning together what would be the best practice. Because, you know, as most of us would say in this industry, if it works and you don't have to look at the code again, you know, we're good.
I'm already laughing because I know the feeling.
You know,
well, here's a question, and so was there a specific moment when it kind of, you know, was it like a specific project or a moment or a thing you built where you're like, TouchDesigner is the one now, like that's really what I want to dedicate myself to?
I don't know if that was a switch that happened, and I still don't think there's such a thing as a switch. I just think that everything I learn becomes another piece of the palette. And I say, okay, well, what could be the right job? What would be the right thing for this project? And more, it comes down to Touch, because I can do so much in Touch.
Yeah, basically anything. As long as you got the time, you can do anything. Yeah.
But I think to get back to this, I think the real thing I can impart is that it's always and continues to be a very gradual and incremental learning experience, where every day there's something new that I get excited about, and also kick myself for never knowing. You know, every time I watch one of your videos or Matthew's videos, I'm like, how did I not know that? And how have I been doing this? I'm so stupid. And then from then on, it becomes a new superpower that I have, you know, that you can just add into your workflow, and it becomes a part of your thing. And so, you know,
I'll even add to that, like that happens to me all the time. I just found out yesterday that you don't have to go .par .parameter name. You can do .par, open up a square brackets, and access the list right there.
See, that's good to know. I thought you had to do set attribute, like you told me.
Right? I know. I was preaching. It said, because if you got to do programmatic, you can't do .par, so you got to do the set attribute thing. Apparently not. Apparently it's like another thing. And I was
what I learned? I learned something, and I'm going to share with everyone because it blew my mind.
Yeah, hit it.
I was watching a tutorial from like 10 years ago, 15. I don't know how.
Was it Richard?
No, it was like Marcus or something from a long time ago. Greg, and he goes and presses F9. You guys ever pressed F9?
Is that the one that so if you do it on a UI, it takes you to the network or something like that?
Yeah, it'll open. You find a UI element anywhere on your container, when it's active, and you put your mouse on top, and when you press F9 or F10, it'll open a new pane with exactly that operator inside. So if you're debugging and you're like, where is this video coming from? I need to fix this video. Just press F9. It'll show you exactly in your network where that comes from. After 8 years of touch, I was like, holy,
it is crazy. Yeah, it's crazy how that still is like a thing. But and I would say like an interesting parallel I have to that is, when I learned Python, I accidentally made the right choice of just accepting incremental. And I remember when I learned Python, like, because I was coming from a music background and Max MSP, and I was like, oh man, I got to learn a coding language. What am I going to do? I was like, you know what? I'm just going to go on Code Academy. I'm just going to do 10 minutes every day. That's it. No more, no less. I'm just going to do 10 minutes, like basically one exercise every day. I'm not lying. I tell people this all the time. In like 2 or 3 weeks, I was like very comfortable in Python. And it's not because I'm like good at programming. People who've seen my Python programming are like, this is like the most basic. This man does not like to be in the code editor a lot of the time, I could tell. But I think it's just a testament to what you're talking about, this incremental mindset and approaching your learning like that, approaching complex challenges like that. Everything just becomes this really fun journey if you approach it incrementally. Otherwise, it becomes just exercises in frustration.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to be in this sort of thing, you have to be okay with that process, and you have to be, okay with doing a lot of research and getting into the forums and, learning a lot. So, it's for any sort of programming, there is sort of a certain resilience that you need to learn and grow and deal with weird crash messages and stuff like that.
So we have a good question here that kind of transitions into us talking about a cool project that you did. And the question is, VJ Dr. Mojo is asking, could any of these techniques be modified to map an image from a moving projector onto a moving target? For example, 2 vehicles in motion. Is that possible? And I think that may be a good transition to DBrain, because that's like a...
Sure.
Things are moving. That is not your run-of-the-mill projection mapping. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to switch over to our other scene here. And it's definitely going to do the thing that... I think it's this one. Dun, 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 dun. We go into like the Matrix. And I've got it pulled up here. Now, for folks that haven't seen it, should we just watch? Let's watch the video, actually.
All right. Sure.
And so they can't hear the music, but do you want to talk about what's going on while you're doing it? Sure. Kind of a little bit of the process behind it and what made you...
Yeah, sure. So to answer the question really quickly, the theory of relativity is the answer. One object moving and one object not moving is the same as the opposite or both objects moving. It's relative. It's relative motion. So you're on the highway, 2 cars are moving. You only need to know the speed differential and distance and transformation differential between one object and the other. And so if you're both moving exactly the same speed on the highway, the only thing you need to care about is the difference between these two. The 50 miles an hour between the world doesn't matter. So
that's a mind blow. That's a mind. My mind is blown already. I mean, it totally makes sense when you explain it, but the thought of it, like it only matters because it's relative, is kind of a mind trip of its own.
Yeah, I mean, we're all spinning right now.
Yeah.
So DBrain was sort of trying to push all of this technique that I've been learning about calibration and real-time projection mapping on moving objects and bring it into a more creative, artful space and collaborate with some friends. So we had trackers on the dancer, on her wrists. We had a tracker on the object so we could know where it was and also project on it in real time. And then we had a tracker on the camera. So as the camera was moving around, we could re-render in perspective correct to the camera. So virtual production stuff, before it was called virtual production.
Yeah.
And so definitely inspired by some early box stuff. We actually collaborated with a friend Ian Cologne who worked on Vox as well, and so had a lot of fun playing around. And we also had Cullen Miller doing analog synthesizer. So what
The
was
soundtrack
really
is
cool,
fantastic, by the way. I just linked everyone in the chat. If you go to harveymoon.com, projects DBrain, definitely watch the video on your side too, because it is a full piece. Visuals, audio, like the whole performance, everything.
Yeah, so what was really fun about this is it was all real time. It was all supposed to be a performative thing. And based on time and budget and volunteer hours, we just had to settle for video, which I think worked out pretty well. But the system that we had in the space, in reality, was so cool because the data being produced by her, we would find like maybe her acceleration of her arm, or where her the height was of her wrist, or where this object was in space, or the relationship between her body and the object could become little vectors and variables that I could send over to the audio system to sonify in real time.
That's awesome. So that's like the dream. That's the dream of like people when they get in the industry, is like, oh, I want to be doing this kind of performance and everything to be reacting and affected by it. So
it was like a perfect use case for TouchDesigner, because we had the technique over there doing the calibration, and then I was there actually adjusting and modifying these variables to change and activate visuals and respond to things, and then that was all being sent over the audio, and then we could hear it in real time. And so the dancer was responding to not only the visuals but also the audio as she was moving and playing around, and it was just really fun, just a space to play, and it's something I'd really like to get back into.
Yeah, because this is like an incredible piece, and especially people who are familiar with the Bot and Dolly box piece. From a technical level, what does the high level of this look like? Is that object that you're projecting on connected to a robot arm? Is it moving? Is there somebody like hidden there? With what's going on with that?
It's way cheaper. So we found a technique where we had a long mast with a counterweight on it. So
that's amazing.
Right? So it was just a very long counterweighted object that would sort of bob up and down almost like without gravity. And it was held by the ceiling from some paracord or whatever. And so she could just toss it up in the air and it would just float and move around. And sometimes we'd have someone on a ladder over here kind of manipulating it and moving it around. Yeah. But it was a boom pole. Yeah, it's just
that's amazing.
Balanced to the weight of the object. It's on the phone.
Yeah, maybe because I'm so involved in tech normally, but the boom pole sounds like the smartest thing I've ever heard. It's like, oh my god, that's so obvious and so effective. I was sitting here thinking like, oh man, there must be like a robot. How did they hide the robot? Like, I'm looking around, even though it's a picture. That thing when you're looking at a screen and you're actually trying to like look around. I'm like sitting here trying to do that, but that is
literally gaffer tape on some conduit.
That's amazing.
That's what that is, yeah.
And then did you use the Vive pucks as your main tracker, like on the object, on the camera, and on the performer?
That's right, yeah.
And then is this kind of...
You can see on the wrist, the puck.
Yeah, I think is that I think I see the puck on the side of the object. Is that it right there?
No, that's the end cap. So we had to hold the conduit in somehow. So
interesting.
There is a tiny little bit that you can see where we had to 3D print that held the end in.
Yeah, this is an awesome one.
On the opposite side.
So then in this point of your kind of calibration development and like workflows, was this was using what you were mentioning, which is what you did the workshop on, which was the Vive feeding into like this cam snapper setup, or was this something else?
Similar. So let's take it up a notch. Let me get those things. So
should I switch back to the camera view? Because right now I'm on the screen share. Hold on, I'm going to switch back. I think you're getting something fancy. It's going to be sick.
Yeah, sure. So
okay, we're back. Yeah, okay. What do we got?
This thing.
And I love how this looks so normal, and you're going to tell me how magical it is in like 10 seconds.
Oh, this thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is our calibration tool, right? So built in, and I don't know if you can see this, but we have 15 fiber optic sensors here. You guys have ever seen the Johnny Lee video?
Hold on, I'm going to make you really big on screen.
Yeah, I don't know if it's visible. They're meant to be pretty well hidden.
Oh yeah, they look like tiny little black dots, right now.
Yeah, they're tiny little black dots, and these are little fiber optic ends. So it's the end of the fiber optic line. And then inside the box is a wireless transmitter that will stream over the brightness values from all of these.
Wow.
And so we attached a tracker on the top and then hit it with structured light, and we can locate sub-pixel accurate each point. And then that in one capture can give us both the 3D positions and the 2D positions from the camera. So we can calibrate multiple projectors using this object, and then just take this object out of the scene, and we've calibrated the world, the projector to the world space.
Okay, hold on. So this is like blowing my mind. So let me slow it down and make sure everyone in chat's like with us. So the fiber optic ends, they're acting like mini cameras, like light sensors, right?
Yes. Yes.
So you're projecting onto that board, and every single one of those sensors is picking up how much light is hitting it.
Yeah.
That data is getting sent back to your TouchDesigner box. And this is part of the Optimap system, right?
This is a different thing.
So this is not even like the thing you're like, yo, we're so hyped, we're gonna release it. This is like more. This is not even that one. This is just something else you have in the office hanging around.
Yes.
That's amazing.
Well, this is like the easy way for me to calibrate multiple projectors in 3D like that. You just bring this into the scene, you capture it, and if you're confused with the structured light thing, it's the same as if we were to send a single pixel stripe across this way and a single pixel stripe across this way, and then whenever it touches one of these, we lock in that number, and so we can say, okay, Y value, Y value, Y value, Y value, X value, X value. Same exact thing. You can do way faster with a couple structured light gray code patterns and discovering from that. So
that's cool.
Yeah,
so then
thing.
Inside of Touch, which is where I assume you're gonna like feed this data to, does it look more like MadMapper, or does it look like just something completely different? Like when this data comes through, does it give you a camera that simulates your projector?
Yes, exactly. So once you capture on that board, it will instantly locate the projector in world space, or as many projectors as you have in world space. Actually, I have a little video.
That's crazy. Do you got a video? Is it a link?
Yeah.
If you send me the link, I can put it up on my screen.
Yeah, let me get you real quick. Hold on.
And in the meantime, I'm gonna do a quick little plug. So you got some minutes. Don't stress about it. So for folks watching, I'm Elburz. I forgot to say at the beginning, but I hope you noticed by the text floating above my head that I'm Elburz. And this is the Interactive and Immersive HQ. We do a lot of really fun stuff, and if you're really interested about kind of taking your touch designer career up a level, become serious, become a professional, turn this into a career instead of just a hobby, I highly recommend checking out the Interactive and Immersive HQ Pro. That is our online school where myself, Matthew Reagan, and many other kind of really high-end developers teach you everything you need to know about Touch Designer right from the ground up. So even if you've never opened Touch Designer, you never used Python, don't worry, we got you covered. And even if you're kind of mid-level or higher-end developer, we also got you covered. We got all kinds of techniques, optimization, render picking, the whole gamut of Touch Designer workflows that you might be getting into, how to set up for large-scale installations, how to architect your projects. And now we've got a lot of really great integration courses. So if you're interested in working with Notch in Touch Designer, Unreal in Touch Designer, Node-RED in Touch Designer, Ableton in Touch Designer, all those things we got covered in our courses. I'm going to drop a link into the chat for you right now. We have a 7-day free trial. So, you could literally go in there, watch a couple courses, not pay any money, and have a good time. But I'm quite sure that you're going to go in there and be like, this is a great place, because between our courses, our private Facebook group where daily we're answering your questions in as much detail as possible. Twice a month, we've got these really great group Zoom sessions where we go and talk in real time about some of the things you're working on and some of the struggles you're having. We got a job board, we got a tool set, we got the whole holistic situation covered. I'm going to drop a link in the chat. Feel free to check it out. We'll be excited to have you. And we have a good time, as my friend Joaquin is saying in the chat. We have a good time. You know, this is, as Harvey was saying, you know, we all want to work together and have a good time. There's no negativity around here. So check out that link in the chat. We'd love to see you in there. And with that said, Harvey, so did you send me a link? Where should I look for?
Yeah, I sent in this chat here.
In the OBS YouTube. Ninja. Yeah. Okay, sick. I'm going to bring up this. Oh, and there's the Optimap link. Okay. Oh, yeah. Okay, hold on. So do you want me to post the Optimap link to the chat?
I mean, there's nothing really on there yet. So, I mean, you could if people wanted to, but...
Yeah, we'll come back to that, because we'll also talk about that a little bit more in a second.
Yeah.
Let me open up this link. And let me turn on the screen share mode. Now I gotta make you small again. One sec. Do. Oh no, I grabbed the wrong thing. There we go. Okay, so people are seeing this YouTube now. I'm gonna go ahead and play it. Oh, that's sick. I already love it. Okay, so do you want to talk over what exactly we're looking at here?
Yeah, sure. So there's the values coming in from each of the fiber optic sensors. We had an wireless ESP8266. Yeah. Then I was thinking about this goes very quickly. So that's the whole part with calibration.
That was the whole calibration.
That's the whole thing. So I used a closed loop system, unlike the a structured light pattern, which you just run once and you hope it works.
I'm playing it back at 0.25 speed, just so people can see it happen.
Yeah, I think that's probably, if we're going to talk through it.
Yeah.
You just start at the very beginning.
Okay, I'll start at the very beginning. Here we go.
Yeah, I guess there's a delay there, but the fiber optic sensors are connected to a wireless ESP8266.
Oh yeah, you're using the D1 Mini.
That's a D1 Mini, yeah.
Nice.
And then because we didn't have enough analog inputs, we just ran it through a multiplexer. So that's pretty simple. And then that streams the data. So we're getting it pretty quickly. And then we just only need to listen 60 frames per second. This is a different algorithm that I made that's similar. It works the same way as discovering points. That's sort of a swipe. But it's a little more robust because it's going to keep adjusting as it reads these values. It'll see that it's missed a part, and it's an algorithm that I sort of invented. I haven't seen anyone else use something.
That's amazing,
sort of weird. But it keeps cutting the pixels down, and when it loses that brightness, it'll open it back up again. And so there at the end, you can see those are the points it's discovered. And then we have a real world understanding of where the projector is relative to this object. It's cat proof because if the cats walk in front of the sensors, it recognizes that it missed a sensor and it'll keep searching for it. It keeps looking until it's discovered all the available sensors.
Yeah.
So then you use the same algorithm that we talked about earlier, the OpenCV calibrate camera. So then you can get the location of the projector relative to any object that the Vive is on.
Yeah.
Then we figured out that if you put the controller on the very edge of any flat surface, you can find 3 points on that controller and make a plane. And so then you could use the touch screen, just layering complexity on here. Use the touch panel on the controller to scale that plane. And then you can hit a button and snap it. And so what you see here is that I'm going into the world and defining rectangles just by using the controller as a 3D point of truth. So then, the world is open, the world is yours. You can then see, you can manually control, interface with things. And here's a sort of touch backend view. I know there's a time delay, so I'm watching the YouTube video as you guys see it, and there's going to be a delay on
folks will be able to tell, but so then there's like that whole 3D viz area inside of touch, which looks really sick too.
So some of these are actually from the palette. I think there was a render, there's like a 3D pick tool that you can use. And so I modified that to use a Vive controller as a pick point. So you can see that sort of laser point is
yeah, that's fun.
It's just touching another container. It's just using a touch, interfacing with it. And so you could suddenly turn anything into an interface. Anything in the real world is now a surface that you can interact with once the virtual world knows that digital surface.
Mm-hmm. This is awesome. Now, out of my curiosity, like, so when you have this and Optimap, which we'll talk about in a second, I think, what makes you use one or the other?
Yeah, so I guess they're really different things. This one gives you the intrinsics and extrinsics of the projector.
Mm-hmm.
So, and here you can see some of the early augmented reality explorations, but it gives you the actual calibrated lensing of the projector in the real world space. And from there, we can just assume that it's going to match whatever TouchDesigner renders with the real world. Yeah. So there's some assumptions there about how it comes together. Now with Optimap, it's a little different because we don't care about the projector, what type of projector, what lens. If it's a super short throw projector, that can be sometimes difficult to calibrate because the principal point is off, and the short throw lenses have a really weird frustum. So there can be some really challenging things with doing this sort of algorithm that you're seeing here with extra short throw projectors. So Optimap is made to be a little more robust for any projector that you want to throw at it. Any sort of system that you're dealing with in a static environment. You want the pixels to be on that surface, we can get the pixels there. This one is a bit more experimental and particular to the gear that you have, and you need fiber optics embedded in your surface or a tool like I showed you to calibrate that shape and then remove. So this isn't something that we've really released out into the world, but it is something that we bring out of the back pocket if we need to do complex calibrations like that. Does that answer that question?
Yeah, I mean, I think myself and most of the chat is still having their minds trying to reassemble themselves after like all of that goodness all at once. So I think an interesting thing would be, is there any kind of final points about the DBrain project that we wanted to kind of like talk about, or anything interesting that you wanted to share about that one? Otherwise, we can move into some questions from the chat, and then we can backtrack to Optimap and kind of talk about that a little bit.
Oh, I don't know. I would love to get back into DBrain. We have some rumbling conversations about bringing it back
Let's do
up. But no, I don't have any more to say about it. I'm just saying I'd love to.
Oh, I see. You'd love to get back into it.
Yeah. But no, I don't have any additional comments on that one. It's
and I highly recommend folks go to Harvey's website. Well, I'll put it in the chat again. There's a lot of really cool stuff on there. A lot of really great variety of your work too. Like it doesn't feel like every project is a rehash of the same thing, or even just built like there's like even the newest one, the scanning one, was really interesting and like completely different than DBrain. So let me hit a couple questions that we got here.
You can also post, on the more sort of professional side, my company MB Labs.
Yeah. What? Give me the link. Let me post the link.
Yeah, I sent that one to you. So yeah, MB Labs is the company I started with some friends, and that does a lot more of the bigger commercial projects and outside of my personal art practice. But
oh wait, I'm posting this all on. Hold on, I gotta post it on YouTube now too. Folks, check out MB Labs. There's a lot of really cool stuff on there. And you want me to bring it up because we can maybe take a look at some stuff you got on there. Oh, there's a lot of really beautiful stuff in here, man. Look at this. Oh yeah, you did the Bio Museo.
Yeah, that's right.
That's a cool one.
That was fun.
So folks, check out MB Labs. There's a lot of really cool stuff here. And don't hesitate to reach out to either Harvey or MB Labs through their website. But But let me catch back up on chat questions here because I think we got a couple good ones.
Sure.
Let's see here. So Jay Fisenko, I hope I'm saying your name correctly. If not, please correct me. Is asking, what about fine tuning? Have you had any situations where the projection doesn't overlap exactly between projectors? They're also curious about blending masks, sometimes needing to tweak that as well. And I think this is something, a common thing people have experienced with CamSnapper, is everything's like is pretty close, but maybe there's a corner that's slightly dipped. And I know some folks go towards, I remember Dev Harlan had a nice tool, Vert Pusher, and you could kind of do it on the SOP side of things, like do a little bit of nudging. Yeah. Some folks like to do it on the 2D side. They'll just pull out Stoner and just kind of like, you know, wiggle it up a little bit. Do you experience that in your systems, or do you have any processes for dealing with that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I guess with Optimap, we've got the alignment really figured out, really tight.
That's amazing. So most of the time you're doing it and you're like, I don't have to touch it afterwards.
Not on the alignment step. Yeah,
That's awesome.
more variable steps can be blending because it's a whole nother can of worms. You know, like I figured out the calibration. Now when you get into blending, you can get into color space, you can get into all other issues. Projectors also, you know, one of the issues we had recently is that if you're not projecting on a flat surface, their brightness is not uniform. So you know, true. For extra short throw, think about it. Like if you have a super short throw projector, the beam,
those like periscope ones.
Yeah, the beam at the very top is maybe half or quarter of the length as the beam coming all the way down, and so if you point that at some surface that's not flat, you'll see very clearly on these short throw that they do a lot of compensation to make a flat, perfect rectangle image. So that can totally mess with algorithms that are expecting, you know, the blending to have a perfect white cast of light. So we've had those issues recently where we've had to sort of go back into blending and figure out, you know, how might things align. As far as tweaks go, if we're doing, you know, the CamSnapper route can go wrong because you don't have a lot of points to work with. So if you want to really optimize for that, you want to get the best lens calibration that you can, and then do a different function instead of CamSnapper. So CamSnapper basically always from the get-go starts from zero. It uses the points that it has and figures out as best it can what the lensing of the projector is. If you do a pre-calibration in your studio or somewhere else where you can actually get the, like with a lot more points, with like 100 points, get a much better definition of what your lens is. Then when you go on site, you can do a different function called PNP, which doesn't recalibrate every single time. It just uses the calibration that you produced before that's really good, and you just give it the points that you want, and it's a lot better fitting to reality.
Oh, interesting. So is that process, like if I'm understanding correctly, you use CamSnapper once, like in the office, in an environment where you have time, space, and these kind of things, and you'd actually do like a CamSnapper with 100 points on it?
Sort of. You can use structured light as a way of capturing all of those pixels. So you can use a camera and a projector together to do like a super CamSnapper, seeing all of the pixels in the projector in 3D space, and then locating all of that and getting a really, really good. See, the problem is with CamSnapper, it will look good for a static object in that one position because that's the best way it can fit with the limited number of points that you gave it. But the function, and I'll bring this as an example. The function OpenCV calibrate camera is expecting something like this, and it's expecting you to capture this like 20 or 30 times.
And actually, I think if folks have used the Connect calibrator, I think Marcus posted on the forum, that's using exactly this method. You project the grid, capture it at a bunch of different places around the room.
Yeah, and then build a stereo calibration between those two. So those techniques are in the same exact realm. That stuff is in the same world. So if you think about what the camera calibration technique wants, it wants a lot of board positions, and each board contains all of these positions that it can know. And so when you're using CamSnapper, you might give it like 6, and then you get a result. How effective is that going to be at discerning every single like layer of distortion or rotation that you have in your projector? It's not enough to get a full, really high quality 3D projector in your virtual space. It's enough to get you pretty good in a hacky way on, and for a lot of jobs I did, that's all you need. Yeah. That's all you need is like,
you put a little 6 point, you do a little nudging here and there, and
but you'll notice a lot of times if you're going to do 6 points with weird lensing and weird projectors, it can go awry really quick.
Yeah, and that's the one that people probably experience, where they put the 6 point, they drag it around, and they just don't see anything come out the other end.
Yeah, and especially if you're going to do moving objects, 6 points is really not, it's only a handful. It only gets you certain amounts.
At that point, it's a magic trick. It's less of like a process than it is like, oh my god, we just did magic. We can kind of make it work with 6 points.
Here's the thing. All of this is always a magic trick. There's no real like right or wrong way about all of it. We read all of these papers about calibration, and they're like, well, you can fudge this and do that and do, this sort of pass and blur it at the end. And so we get into all of these things. Like, all right, well, that's
now we're talking. Like, now we're talking.
Yeah, that's some Gaussian blur. Like, all right,
So we got a good question from Joaquin here. Joaquin's saying, "Happy Friday, everyone! Beautiful project. On the subject of trackers, have you seen the new Tundra trackers? And if so, what do you think about those?" I actually don't know what these trackers are. What are the Tundra trackers?
The privilege of playing around with some Tundra trackers a few weeks ago, and I think I posted a couple videos of how that was going. They're a small form factor tracker made by a really nice group of people that used to work with Triad. So they're really well and familiar with the actual sensor module. And so they've sort of taken the Triad sensors that are the same exact sensors they use in Vive and built another tracker that's a lot smaller. It's fits in the palm of your hand. It tracks pretty well. I had a very early demo unit. So there were a few kinks in how it was, but it was extremely impressive, just like how small it was. But speaking of which,
and just for my reference, is this the same Tundra group that does a lot of like really amazing art installations and uses TouchDesigner, or is this just called a Tundra tracker?
No, a Tundra is that other company that does cool projects. Tundra Tracker is
this is just another company.
Labs. Yeah. It's a cool name. But I just got these this morning, so I'm going to show it off.
Oh, is this an unboxing? You should do an unboxing. Like you gotta like get your Leatherman out. You gotta make the incision in the tape.
I did it in front of you. I didn't show you. I'm sorry. Brand new, just out of the box right now.
Look at that.
These are the new Vives. And the reason why I went back to the Vive stuff is that the form factor of this is very well defined. And if you've ever tried to make your own Vive tracked SteamVR tracked object, there's a lot more you have to do to design the object in 3D to make it resilient to occlusion.
Oh,
and so there's a big important reason why this is shaped in this way to get the most sensor positions as it's moving around in space. And so the occlusion that I would encounter with the Tundra tracker, because of its shape and size, was a little greater than I'm able to get. So these are really, really resilient and extremely well engineered. HTC has done a great job.
And this is kind of following up on that. VJ Dr. Mojo's asking, what's the general range on Vive trackers? I think it's pretty good, right? It's like a 15-meter box or something like that. If you have two,
the Vive 2 is like crazy.
Is it even more?
Well, if you get 2. You get 4, you can.
Oh yeah, isn't it up to like is it 100 meters or something craziness now, or 60 meters? 100? I remember reading something real big.
10 meter by 10 meter.
10 meter by 10 meter. That's pretty hype. It's a lot of meters.
They had something early on where you could keep adding base stations and keep expanding the size, but I don't think it expanded to that. I don't know. but it's still, as far as a really like extremely fast and accurate tracking solution for under $1,000, there's nothing else.
Oh, I mean, for the price, it's amazing.
Anti-latency stuff. I have not played with that. But I am always going to be a little skeptical about a camera-based system, at least for the time being. I know it's getting much, much faster with Stipe and, inside-out tracking on headsets and stuff. But still, there is anti-latency. There's still layers there of CV processing, data transmission, that have to be figured out. And I think we're just still a little early. I've been watching this anti-latency camera-based system for a little bit. Inside-out tracking is growing incredibly fast, and I think it's gonna be here soon. I'm just not fully. I'd love to try it. Really, yeah. I haven't gotten into it. But of course, you need that tracking map on the ground to do that one.
Here's a good question. We got a good question from Jordan Holt Dev, and I think a lot of people are probably wondering too. Can you tell us a little bit more about your space and like your workshop? Like, it looks like there's a lot of cool stuff.
Yeah,
sure. It looks like a real like workspace, not like by plain white wall.
This is MEABS LA. So if you guys want, you can reach out and welcome to give you a little tour. Oh, awesome. It's pretty small, and I think over COVID we've been pretty lean. We haven't been open, but we used to do a lot more events and workshops and things like that. So we're looking to get back into that a little bit coming up. But yeah, this is sort of our main studio workspace here in LA.
That's awesome. It looks like a lot of fun. It looks like a fun spot with lots of like goodies and gadgets.
Good stuff. Here, I got something I could show. So this background here, and you can see it on our website. It's called Zephyr, and it's a kinetic. You can see there's.
Oh yeah, let me make your screen big.
Can we see that? So we have a sort of a homemade like rig up there that.
And that's the one on mblabs.org, like the first. That's Zephyr.
Yes, that's right. So this is one we made over.
Oh, whoa! I was not expecting it to like pop off. That's sick.
It's all volumetrically controlled in touch too. So all of those motors are wirelessly communicating to TouchDesigner and giving back feedback about where they are and what they're doing. And then each one can open and close.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, they all have. Each one has 2 motors. So they can actuate up and down, and then also open and close individually.
And then you've got some lighting inside of each one, right?
Not on these. We had some external lighting, and they glow really nice when you backlight them. So
that's amazing.
It's a sort of plastic material called UPO.
That's super cool.
So yeah, we do fun stuff like that. We do robotics and kinetics, and we have a couple engineers. We do circuit board design and production. So a little bit of everything in there. I'm sort of the big touch guy, but we have our hands on all sorts of different fun stuff.
That's awesome. And like Harvey was saying, folks, don't hesitate to reach out if you're in the LA area. Hit up Harvey on mblabs.org or harveymoon.com. We'll post those links again. VJ Dr. Mojo was asking, damn, I got to go to a job site. My condolences, my friend. My condolences. This will be archived on Twitch. Yeah, Twitch holds the recordings for 60 days, I believe, and YouTube holds them basically forever. So, yes. And any folks watching, you can always refer back to this because there's a lot of fun stuff in here. I Beef Alone was asking, have you ever worked with OptiTrack or Blacktracks? I think you'll find some similarities in techniques to what you've described recalibration.
Yeah, totally. And hello, good to see you, Beef Alone. I don't know if she's still around. But yeah, that's the next level. That's really where people are at, and Bicon is up there too, and doing really cool stuff. That is, motion tracking, if you can afford it, is the way to go. So all of the bigger, virtual production sites now are all getting on board with the actual motion tracking rig. So if you have the cash, that's the way to go. But
the real way to go, if they really have the cash, is Optimap. Am I right?
Always. Just give me a call.
Always. Yeah, always.
Real.
And so what are, like, so for folks that aren't as familiar with OptiTrack and BlackTracks, like, what are some of the differences between those systems and kind of what we've been talking about with more like structured light and, you know, Cam Schnapper and these things? Like, what are the kind of differences there?
Yeah, so they're, I guess you wouldn't even think about them as the same sort of thing. OptiTrack and BlackTracks and Vicon and these sorts of things are real-time tracking, mostly for motion tracking, motion capture, like
so like marker-based stuff.
Marker-based, and they might illuminate little. They have little dots. You've seen Avatar sort of movie experience, and you wear these things, and then you can have a whole array of cameras on the ceiling that will see each dot and use a lot of the same techniques we were talking about to actually calibrate all of these individual cameras to the 3D space. So when you put one of these dots in the world, each one can triangulate it using their respective locations as understood by their positions. So very similar to the way that a Vive tracker works, in that there's two things up there that, you know, these are illuminating devices, but the opposite is the case, where we know where these things are and we can triangulate the location based on those positions.
Yeah, and one of the reasons I think those are usually like more expensive is because you need a lot of cameras. Like, aren't the base systems like still 12 cameras or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, you have to think about occlusion. So you have to think about if one camera gets blocked, can we see it with at least 3 cameras from another view? And then the more cameras are going to give you more consistency in that view. And the cameras have to be really fast to keep up and be synchronized, so they're always customized cameras. So the setup of these rigs is much more expensive, and they're
not the kind of rigs you move that often.
I mean, you can. I've seen people do shows like Rhizomatics does live shows with motion capture Vicon rigs and trains it on site everywhere they go. And
does the wand calibration and everything right before the show?
Yeah,
that's crazy.
I mean, they're very impressive.
Dedication,
stuff, but
it's dedication.
Yeah, they're ahead of the time. So, that is sort of the next big thing. It's just not really accessible if you don't have the cash for those systems. But those are really above and beyond for motion tracking.
Jumpy's got a good question. Have you messed at all with Jarrett's new lens distortion implementation? I'm actually not familiar with this one is, so
yeah,
you can also educate me on this.
This is a way to distort your output. So what happens is when you do like a Cam Schnapper thing, you are sort of imagining what that would be in the real world without all of these. You kind of reorient it as what's called a pinhole model, so that it can be a rectilinear view. So like real lenses are not just perfect frustrums. They have all this weirdness to them, and light moves in strange ways. And distortion happens because the lens in its curvature has different levels of thickness, and light moves through. And when you look at sort of a scene, you can see, especially in a fisheye lens, you can see a distortion coming out. And so when you're doing things like compositing your virtual world, which is being done with a virtual camera, and then you're putting that on top of stuff that's captured in the real world with a real camera that has all this weirdness, you can get these inaccuracies where the virtual camera is perfect, but the real world camera is, real
world object,
and has real world issues. So the camera, as far as I understand, the camera distortion top is a way to do more cool augmented reality compositing, where you can sort of simulate and add these distortions into your render, so that when it comes on the outset, you can match.
It can overlay or match enough, but not be exact, and still like work out well.
Yeah, I mean, there's certain, I don't know, I haven't done much with the distortion top, but I know that there's a couple of distortion coefficients that are numerical values that you can get from OpenCV calibrate camera that then you could use as a distortion modifier. So we usually do something similar. To do like a distortion or undistortion, we'll apply the distortion coefficients to a remap top.
Interesting.
So you can just take a generic UV as your input, apply a distortion or undistortion onto that UV, and save it. And then you can use that UV as a remap at any time in the future to apply or, undistort or redistort your input video, either rendered or captured.
That's been one of like the really interesting techniques, not to kind of verge off a little bit, but Remap Top has so many crazy uses, and it's so efficient and so flexible, and it feels like there are so many workflows that it can play into. Like, are you using that a lot, like within your workflow? Like, even now we're talking about using it now with their coefficients.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think if derivatives here, I think that for recently allowing the resolution to be adjusted by the input. So we used to actually have to write our own remap tops in GLSL that were like allowed for a couple different things, but they've expanded it a little further recently, and it's just a really powerful operator for all this sorts of stuff. So yeah, so and then tutorials recently with remap. There's a ton of really fun tutorials that I've been playing with, learning new things about what to do with the remap, and package 12's tutorials are really fun too.
We got a good question from Joaquin here. Wonderful working website. Electronics questions. Do you use a lot of it in your installations? Do you use Arduino for quick proof of concepts? And what do you think of Modbus for permanent installations?
Oh, I don't know Modbus too well. We've done a couple things where we bring, there's like Arduino PLCs that we can, bring it into, a more professional realm if they need to. A lot of times we'll still convince the client to go with something like Arduino because we can build a lot of spares and hot swap. And there's a real power to that. If something goes wrong, you can buy one and it shows up in, in a day, and we can get you back up and running. So, we try to keep it pretty minimal, and we keep all the logic and stuff happening in touch or software somewhere else.
Oh, so you keep the electronic side kind of more like flow through and more connections to real world objects, as opposed to putting a lot of like brains in there.
Oh yeah. You definitely don't want to be messing with firmware, and the more you can consolidate your logic, the better you're going to be. So, with that,
you were using the D1. I can't remember who makes that. It's Weibo, something.
Wemos, yeah.
Wemos.
But you can buy it, on Amazon now. Everyone sort of copied the design, and it's based off the ESP8266. So there's a lot of new, really cheap chips coming out now that you can put Wi-Fi on and run OSC and communicate directly through. So a lot of times we'll just have it pop up on Wi-Fi and then stream the data, and then we can check and see, did we get enough packets to say that we got it, and we can actually look at that communication protocol and make sure that we're getting that communication. If it's a permanent installation, switch over to something with an Ethernet PoE is always preferred. So we'll build a board or go with an Ethernet shield with a PoE on it, so that we can just put it in the box, and then we'll make a nice 3D printed box out of it and sell it as a product. And people don't care what's inside as long as you support it. And we build a few backups and put them in the back room in case something goes wrong.
And actually, now that you mentioned 3D printing, because you also mentioned doing some 3D printing for DBrain, is that like a big part of your workflow these days? Like, are you finding 3D printing is... Because I had let me tell you, I had a 3D printer for a month, and it was fun, but me being more of like a digital person and kind of more software side, it was fun, but I never found that like, here's how I'm going to use it in my work. But it sounds like you've actually like integrated it in a lot of ways into your work.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I've always had a lot of more mechanical, physical building properties. So that's a part of my palette is how do you put two things together in real life. And so, yeah, I mean, I was really thankful to learn SolidWorks really early on. And it's been a really core part of my practice too, is like, a lot of times the parts you don't see, right, have to be put together. So that whole boom rig needed maybe 6 or 7 custom parts in a night.
Oh, wow.
To hold like, here's a collet to keep this on the end, and a set screw with a heat insert over there. And then, the centerpiece needs to be adjustable, but also allow for the string to go through. And, the counterweight needs its own support structure. So The invisible things that you can whip up really quick and make a mount, make a base amount for something in a minute is really powerful. And I think there's a lot of ways to access to. I know that OpenSCAD is a really, if you're a programmer, OpenSCAD is a really easy way to generate 3D models for printing. So a lot of times we'll make 3D models in our software. It's not printable. Although there's ways you can export TouchDesigner objects to 3D printer, which is really fun.
That sounds like a workshop of its own right there.
That's a whole nother can of worms. But yeah, 3D printing is a lot of fun. All of these pieces are all 3D printed in the back there.
Is there a 3D printer, like if someone was just getting started and they were kind of interested in 3D printing? Like, would you say,
Prusa
SolidWorks? Sorry, which one is it?
Get a Prusa Mini. It's like $400.
How do you spell that?
I have one over there, and Prusa is just like my favorite open source printer. They're super solid. You'll
How do you
love
spell it? I'll put a link in. Prusa. Okay, yeah, I got it.
Prusa Mini. Prusa printers, top of the line. Love them to death. And then we got a fan in here. And then I think OpenSCAD, if you're a programmer, is a pretty easy access point. I know Fusion 360 is what everybody uses.
That's an AutoCAD one? Autodesk.
Autodesk, and I think there's a few ways I think there's a free version or something. If you have SolidWorks or access to SolidWorks, that's a career move right there. There's a lot of really, like, just knowing SolidWorks opens doors. So that's been a really good one. And once you can sort of build things that come to your mind, the sky's the limit. You can do all sorts of stuff. So I'm constantly building little things to hold screens or apparatus. So, here's a really weird one. This is a handle with a dial there and a little screen that communicates to touch. And then I can, instead of running back to my keyboard, I can program a couple macros so that, calibration point or shifts,
that's awesome.
It's got a battery on it and stuff. So just constantly building weird things that connect to each other or whatever.
So I think now is a great time to take a look at Optimap a little bit if we want to talk a little bit more about it. I've got the site pulled up, so I'll bring that up on my screen here.
Site? Yeah, maybe I should just pull up Optimap and show you guys.
Do you want to pull up and do a screen share, or what do you think? What's best?
Well, I didn't prepare for it, so I'm a little
or even just talking about it conceptually, because I think folks are really because if the other thing that blew everyone's mind was not even like an Optimap is something else that's like this is the real thing, I think folks would be really excited just to hear a little bit about it more, how it works in practice, and I assume most folks will have to get in touch to learn more about it and kind of get using it, if in any sense.
Yeah, let me see if I can. If there's something I can show here.
And what actually I can do in the meantime, which a few people have requested, is the square brackets parameter thing. I could do that real quick. Here, let me show. Let me see here.
Is it possible to share a screen? Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, if you should be able to hit share screen and it'll just replace your camera with the screen for a sec.
All right. Can we see that?
Let me see here. Oh boy, where did I go?
It's at a secondary stream, so I don't know.
Okay, hold on a sec. Let me go back to side by side. Oh yeah, hold on. Oh, I see black on your screen right now. Let me check. I might have to grab the. Oh, I see it. Yeah, I got a link. Okay, hold on. Let me grab that. OBS. We go to full. Guest screen.
Moving around here.
That's me, and then you can become smaller. What is that screen? Hey, we got it. Yeah, talk us through this. This looks amazing, by the way. Mm-hmm. Oh, hold on a sec. Sorry, hold on a sec. They can't hear you. I hit the wrong button and it made your microphone go away. Sorry. Run it back. Let's run it back. This looks amazing.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, they should be able to hear you now.
All right.
We'll get a quick. Give us a 1 if you can hear Harvey still.
Yes.
Okay, good. Sorry, that's my fault.
Okay, so yeah, so we start with setup. It's made for a distributed system, so you could run this on your laptop, and then you could send this, through either a multicast or an MQTT communication to other nodes on your network. So if you had, you could just pop open your laptop that's running Optimap, connected to your camera. Maybe that's on the network too, and then run this whole calibration system, and then take your laptop with you when you leave. And so all you need is the final result files from this. So in this case, we have a projection surface, but we have a couple different methods. So if you didn't have a textured UV model, like say you did a laser scan of something, and those UV models are all wacky, there's another way that's a lot more like Vioso, where you could just get the projector to look, fit the shape. But our main pipeline here is that we know your object and we have a calibration UV map onto that shape. And so from here we can simulate, and this is a virtual view because we're going to look at it virtually here. But this is a simulation of what your projector layout might look like. So we've done a little bit to, we can show the frustrums here, or we can just look at the projection and see the throw and
awesome.
how well things, pan out. No, this is the view from this top camera. So if we want to think about, what would be the view from a fisheye lens?
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
That's the sort of expected view if you have all these cameras. And then just as if this was the real world, we can turn on and off, and there's an IED view. So you can see how all of this would result in the real world. And you can see there's some lighting discontinuities. And if you go all white, you can see these are blend regions we need to worry about later on and stuff like that. And we can make adjustments to these projectors. There's also some layouts here we can, adjust these and see how they change in real time.
Oh, wow, look at that.
Or reload the simulation. And so sort of always had a trouble manipulating objects in a UI in Touch. And so sort of defaulted back to more standard 3-view perspectives like other 3D objects. So this one down here gives you the option to, from the projector's perspective, change its viewport.
Interesting.
And then each of these gives you a different axis of manipulation of that. And then we can load and resave all of those settings in a JSON. From there, we have a sort of capture step. So we can then see our camera image. If you have a live video feed, then this would be a live video feed. For now, we're going to just, because it's a simulation, we're just going to show you from the rendered view from the perspective of that simulation you just saw. So we can do all the same calibration function using that simulator to try out and make sure that everything's running as it should. And we did what we could to try and get this, to look close to reality. But of course, there's going to be things. There's also a little artifact slider. So in order to sort of help deal with some artifacts that can come into play in reality, like ambient light, we can add some of that into the simulated projection so that we can see how well it will deal with other lighting situations, because we do a lot to try and compensate for variations in lighting during your
so it's almost like a stress test added in.
Exactly. Yeah. For a lot of times, we can test in the real world, but we're going to do a lot of experimentation and simulation to get the functionality working. So from here we can just kind of go down the line, and there's a bunch of different sub processes that we can check to verify that different parameters are set correctly. So in this case, we're looking to check and see the threshold. This is obviously something that would be more evident in real life.
Mm-hmm.
But you can see here as I slide this up and down, we're going to lose detail on the edges. And so what you really want to do is find the slider value where you get a nice crisp grid on the entire surface. We have another edge function here. So we need to define the exact edges of the projection. And so there's another slider here where we can sort of pinch in based off of the brightness of that projector, how much we want to capture and add to the final data. If it's too dim, then I just want to yank it out. And then if it's too bright, like we saw those artifacts, you're going to get a lot of these issues here. So in this case, we might have too much artifact to actually, we got to tell them to turn the lights off. You can't calibrate with the lights on. So, or we might want to bring, use a brighter projector in that instance. If the ambient light is too much, you can't make anything happen.
And that's actually a good question that we got in the chat. Drumbeat's asking, does it model the lumens of the projector in the workflow? Or I guess does that just get automatically?
No, I mean, that gets so complicated. There's just so much. Yeah, there's so much to go on that we don't try to simulate in reality how the brightness works out. There's other ways that we can do brightness calculations and stuff. But yeah, that's a whole other can of worms doing, luminosity, especially with the different, surfaces and stuff. So we're sort of expecting more perfect scenario in Optimap. So from there, we also have a grouping method. So what you can see here is that it's able to, I have to do another group capture, but it's able to discern which elements overlap and save you a lot of time by not capturing them at the same time. So if you have two sides of the projection here, you can see this red group contains one on the floor and one on the wall. This one, green, is the floor and the wall. And there's some tweaks here I'm brushing through, but it's able to intelligently see what overlaps and what can I capture at the same time, save you a lot of time on the capture. And so here we have the capture stage. It'll tell you how many captures and how long it should take.
Oh, that's cool.
So we're going to try this, but we might have to just segue to conversation while it does its thing. Because,
that's fine. Because we do have a question. Justin's asking, what about different projector resolutions? So I guess that would be on that first stage where you were defining each of your projectors. You could say, I got 4 1080 projectors and 2 4K projectors, and the rest of the workflow is more or less the same, right?
Exactly. Yeah. We did consider that in the beginning. It needs to project different patterns for different resolutions. For 4K, you need more patterns, less if it's 720p. 1080 is 12 for each dimension. So it really 12 and then double that for the brightness variation compensation. So it will intelligently know with your resolutions here what exact capture
what kind of grid and stuff to use. Interesting. So then once it comes out of that capture process, and I guess, we probably, do we have a, I guess, interesting. So
I think this one might be a little challenging. So, well, maybe we can see from here. So we have the gray code. So the intermediary step is sort of a remap from the perspective of the camera. So
interesting.
I think these are from the last project here, but
you
can get the idea. So I think there was some issues with the capture that it might not be successful. So I'm not going to waste too much time on trying to make that succeed. But what you get as an intermediary is this remap that gives you, like I said earlier, all of the pixels in perspective of the camera. So we can pick through and see here's what the wall is.
Cool.
And we're able to pretty evenly discern what all these are. And then there's some interpolation functions that we can do to fill some of these gaps that it wasn't able to see or that it mixed. So that's another big part of that part. And then,
great. So there's even like post-processing and like finessing that you can just do right in there.
You can, yeah. And there's a little bit more manipulation after the fact. So this shows the manual method. We sort of have a hack on the stoner. So it's sort of a backward stoner. So we can look at the camera view and we can put the texture on it. And this is, again, the manual way of doing it. If you had a textured geometry, this would automatically happen because we already know what that surface is supposed to be. But for some people that don't have a textured geometry, you can manually adjust the alignment of what the output should be based on the camera's perspective. So from there, when you process that, you get a final output file that you can bring back into Touch. It does your blending and the warping for every channel.
This seems like, so you've got like a lot of different cases and edge cases covered.
Well, it's meant to pretty much handle any static projection with any number of projectors that you can throw at it. So if you had a 3D model, we can do really advanced localization and ray tracing stuff to do all that automated. If you just had, a flat surface to project on, you can do a little bit of manual work and get it up and running in an hour and use it for events. So we're trying to target a couple different audience for this. There's the end client that we don't want to call us again, and we just want to be able to.
Oh, I know that one.
we don't want to be flying on site to tweak projection. So we want to give the client the ability, and all the processes that I showed you, once you have them set up, you can hit one button and it goes through that sequence and captures the whole sequence. So we want to be able to give the client the power to do the recalibration on their own. And we've got it to a point where they can just hit a tablet on another UI and it activates the sequence.
Yeah.
The other use case is TouchDesigner engineers like yourselves that are doing these jobs and need a really quick, robust way to launch, and calibrate a bunch of projectors. So if you're running out of time and you need to just quickly set up, 6 or 8 projectors, and you don't have all night to map them, or you're not sure if that warping is going to be successful, because that can really bite into your time. This can be a really, really rapid way of deploying multi-projector solutions, all within TouchDesigner. So you don't have to, work with other platforms or plugins and stuff.
Yeah, because this would work for like domes, flat surfaces. Like it seems like, can it do like those crazy, like it can even do 3D kind of meshed stuff like on the walls and.
Yeah. I mean, it's pretty remarkable. I don't know if I can open up. I don't know if I'm allowed to open up some of these other ones, but.
Oh yeah. Don't worry. It's all good.
Yeah, but keep some of it private. But yeah, you could throw buildings at it. You could throw any surface you can hit.
That's awesome.
With Projector and.
Congrats, man! This looks like a crazy tool. This looks awesome. And we do have a question from Jay Fasenko, which I hope I'm saying your name right. I feel like I might be saying it wrong, but please correct me if I'm saying it wrong. But any hint on the cost? And I'll just go ahead and, unless you want to say something, I can say contact for more information.
Yeah,
all right.
I think that's
is that the best way?
That's where I'm going to pass it off, but it will be a per channel cost.
Yeah.
And then it'll be very similar to TouchDesigner per year. So,
cool.
If you want to, if you wanted to keep using it as a developer every year, you can continue to purchase that license. If you want to buy it for a client, install it in their system, then you buy it once and set it, forget it.
And we got a good question. Is there an HQ discount? Don't worry, we'll do our best. We'll do our best.
See what we get.
Yeah, and Greg's asking, how does this hook in with cube map renders, if at all?
Oh, well, I guess I don't know what you mean. On the output side?
I mean, are there any cube maps? I guess that's really where Greg's question is coming from. Like, are you using cube maps behind the scenes for any of this?
There's no cube maps.
No cube maps.
No cube maps here. I guess we're doing a fisheye projection here.
Mm.
But no, I would love to know more about that question too. But you know, sometimes when we're doing an output like this, if they want to project on this surface, the input texture could be a cube map. You know, just how it's going to build the remap based off of the UV embedded on the surface.
Yeah. Well, that's amazing. Thanks for showing us that. I appreciate it. I know it's early time, so there's definitely a little bit of like, I hope everything works while we're showing it. Oh, and I think, is your camera back? Is that what I see under there?
Yeah,
I think it is.
Switching back over.
Yeah,
I think this is still super early, and you know, I wasn't prepared to give a full demo, but I'm glad it worked as a little.
Oh, that's awesome! Even just seeing the behind the scenes is like super cool. Like,
but, you know,
that is going to be powerful.
If anyone wants a more in-depth view of that, just hit me up and we can go into the details.
Yeah, and I'll also link here the website for now, even though there's not a ton of stuff on there yet. By all means, check it out.
Get some documentation from what's in the field right now that has it. But since it's so new, we're working on getting the rights to show some of that documentation. But you know, we're always looking for new opportunities to just show this off a little bit more and cool new surfaces. But we've been busy during the pandemic, so this has been the big pandemic project for us.
I mean, that's great that there's been something that you've turned to in the pandemic versus just kind of sitting on your hands. So I think that's like, if that's the output of it, it's pretty amazing. Give me a second here. You got some artifacts that I'm trying to, let me see if I switch it back and forth.
I see that.
Yeah, how do I get, because I don't see it in OBS Ninja.
Here.
If this is gonna sound awful, but if you do like 2 jumping jacks, I think it might yeah, it'll like wipe it. Folks, this is how high-end technology works, by the way. If it doesn't work, I think we just do 2 jumping jacks and it's like cleaned up.
We're good.
Great. So we're getting to the end of our stream here, and I guess real quick, because somebody requested it, they want to see that parameter square brackets situation. Let me see. So full disclosure, I've never like done this. I just have heard that this is how it works. So let me figure out. This should be, oh no, that's my face. We don't want that to get too big. Okay, and that's you over here. Let me put you there. Move me down here. This is my screen. That's my screen. Okay, and I got touch open here. Okay, so this is how I understand. This blew my mind the other day. So let's say I've got something like a constant shop, old constant, and I got a bunch of channels. Why? Sorry, I do a bunch of channels. Previously, you know, your first thought is like, okay, op constant 1 dot par, and then you need the name of the par, so you click on it and you see, okay, value 0 is what I want, and you would do value 0 equals 1, and then you go ahead and run that, and you know, Bob's your uncle from there. Which I said yesterday, and somebody was like, Bob is actually my uncle, and it doesn't hit as well with those people. But then the problem was you couldn't really make this programmatic easily, because you couldn't do something like, you know, for I in range, let's say, how many do we got there? 6. You know, you couldn't do something like this and say this is now plus I. Like that doesn't, that no worky. It brokey. And then what you used to have to do was the whole set attribute thing, which I don't really want to get into like a whole example of that. But apparently what you can do is use a set of square brackets after par. And so hold on, before I even do the for loop example. So you could actually do this, and that is a valid way of accessing the parameter, which I had never, I'm like, wow, I like that. That looks clean. And then my understanding, and this is where I think, like, hopefully this works. We could turn this into an F string. Let's do it. Let's see. I've never tried this. So this is like, you guys are watching this. You guys are look at that. That is clean. And Harvey, actually, I don't hear you anymore. I hope you're still. Watching. Oh, you're there. Okay, cool. Okay, that's you can noise. So this is like a totally valid thing you can do, which I think for a lot of people is a lot easier than set adder. Because set adder, like when you try and explain it to somebody for the first time, they're like, I have no idea what you're like even speaking about. Like, what do you? So this is like, I just found this out the other day. My mind was a bit blown.
I love that.
I kind of feel like this might be my new way of doing this going forward. I haven't heard anyone say don't do it because of XYZ reason. And I was talking to Mikkel the other day about if there's any safeties, and I think actually there might be. Somebody said this doesn't completely error out. So if I do, like, if I misspell it, oh, it does error out. Okay, so I think behind the scenes maybe it's similar, but it looks cleaner. It's a lot easier than set adder. I kind of dig it. So hopefully that trick is interesting. And if I just summarize the trick, instead of having to do dot par dot and then the name of your parameter, you can actually just open up a little list search and grab whatever you need from in there by name, which is nice because then you can do little string formatting stuff. So do F strings, if you haven't seen them, pretty hype. That's the trick. I hope folks in the chat enjoyed that one. I'll make don't worry, I'll make a YouTube video on that one. But I enjoyed that one. That's a cool one. Like, I was not expecting.
That's cool.
Yeah. Oh, hold on. Now I can't hear you for sure, and I don't know why. Hold on. Wait. Say something.
Can you hear me? Hello?
I see the levels moving.
Uh-oh.
They can hear you. Oh my God, what is happening?
Well,
there we go. Now I got it. Chrome decided to mute. Chrome decided to mute you for some reason. I blame Chrome.
I'm here.
That's a fun one, eh? That's like a nice, like, that's going back to your F9 trick. Like that.
Yeah, I learned something new today. I appreciate that.
That is like, now I want to go around and mess with F9 because that sounds like fun. So with that said, my friend, is there anything you would like to leave folks with? I'll drop your links in the chat again, but if you want to give them some final words, by all means, let them know where they can find you, where they can hit you up, and all that good stuff.
No, yeah, I mean, I'm really just happy that the Touch community is growing the way it is, and you've been a big part of that, and so I appreciate everything you brought to the table, and all the good friends we've seen today in the chat. It's really great to see you all show up. So reach out, mbulabs.org, hit me up. I'm on the forums and socials and stuff, and yeah, it'd be great to meet you all. I
think with that said, it's been our pleasure to have you, my friend. Thanks so much for sharing your knowledge. It is so cool to see how far you've taken, like, projection mapping and all of these kind of workflows in a really kind of cool incremental like workflow. Like it just feels like you tackled each one and you just let it kind of, you never got discouraged along the way, like I think a lot of people sometimes do, which is awesome to see. So thank you.
Touching the surface, man. We're all always just touching the surface. So
yeah,
always more to learn.
So with that said, folks, viewers at home, thanks for joining us. Thanks for your questions. It's been a really fun session with Harvey. I put the links to mblabs.org in the chat and harveymoon.com to see Harvey's personal projects. And I would be remiss if I didn't try to shill you something before you close the window. HQ Pro, we have a free trial. It's probably the most comprehensive TouchDesigner education you can get online right now. We got over 80 hours of courses. We've got a closed Facebook group where myself, Matthew Reagan, and our other fantastic teachers are there every day answering your questions as best we can. We got 2 group Zoom sessions a month where we go through stuff live. We got a tool set. We've got a job board. I could sit here all day just like karate chopping features out of the air. But really the best thing you can do is no commitment, 7-day free trial. You can get in there, check out all access to it for 7 days. You can see if it's the right fit for you. I think for a lot of people, it is the best place to get your TouchDesigner skills up and running. So with that said, folks, thanks for joining us today, and we will see you in the next live stream.
Yo, adios. Thanks, Elburz.
No problem.